Hello and welcome to part one of our exploration of Othello, our latest journey on the channel. And again, you might be interested in my other videos, so again, have a look at those. But for now, let us think about Othello. So welcome, and we're going to go into Act 1, Scene 1. And first of all, here are the characters. You can pause that and have a look at it. You might be familiar with it already, so I will leave that up to you. I was thinking of going through it all in turn, but I decided against it, so we will do that as we go through instead. So the opening of the play is set in Venice, and if you imagine Venice with the canals, and you're thinking of gondoliers and all of that kind of iconography, this is what Shakespeare is trying to recreate on stage. And what you've got is this would be a scene at night. In Shakespeare's time, they didn't do night performances because they didn't have artificial lighting to do it. So they would suggest nighttime with torches and actually within the dialogue, within the play itself. And Shakespeare opens the play as he always does. He starts in medias res, which is in the middle of things. And it's magically appeared there in the side for you. And it means starting in the middle of things. So Shakespeare cuts out all the boring early bits of a conversation and we're right in the middle of the action. So we know we've got two characters here, Roderigo and Iago, and we've got a sense of the nighttime coming through here actually, with the idea of them effectively trying to keep quiet as they're sneaking around at night. So opening lines: "Tush, never tell me, I take it much unkindly that thou, Iago, who hast had my purse as if the strings were thine, shouldst know of this." So Shakespeare establishes a relationship between the two characters earlier on, or early on, straight away I should say. And you've got his money. So Roderigo is obviously paying Iago for something. We don't know exactly what it is yet, but we're going to find out pretty soon, or we get a very clear idea pretty soon of what's going on. These early sequences, and we've got thou toldst me thou didst hold him in thy hate. So Shakespeare here is using circumlocution, which means talking around, which does help to add to the tension of the scene as well. It's a bit artificial because we all know the title of the play, and that's very true even in Shakespeare's time, of course, as well. They'd know the title of the play they're going to see. So they're talking about the main character, Othello, who doesn't appear in this first scene, but we're certainly going to learn some things about him and characters' attitudes towards him as well. And one of those things is that these two, whoops, I was moving the whole page, these two hate whoever it is they're talking about. It's Othello. There's no prizes for guessing that one, I'm afraid. But there's no prizes for anything, I'm sorry. Then we get a sense of Iago's grievance here. He's been overlooked for promotion. He feels as if he's been overlooked for promotion. And this is the idea of, in personal suit, to make me his lieutenant, or lieutenant, some people might pronounce it, Americans might pronounce it as lieutenant. And in Shakespeare's time, they would have pronounced it lieutenant as well. It doesn't really make a massive amount of difference. But the idea is, this is Iago wanting to be second in command to Othello. He was expecting to get the job. Various local dignitaries have supported his application, but he's been overlooked. So he's bitter about this, and this is hatred for Othello. Now, later on in the play, we'll get into more discussions about Iago's hatred for Othello and where it comes from. But for now, we'll save that. We'll just put that on the bench just for now. So then we have, but he is loving his own pride and purposes, evades him with a bombast circumstance, horribly stuffed with epithets of war, and in conclusion. So there's criticism of Othello here. Othello is actually, he is the top general. He's the top general, the top military leader, the best man for the job in Venice. And he happens to be a Moor. And again, I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. So Again, bear with me. There's a lot to unpack, but we will get there, don't worry. So Othello is the general, and he's chosen his officer. He's criticised. He's saying he's kind of stuffed of his own importance and arrogance, and he said, well, I've already got my lieutenant sorted out. I've already chosen him. And he means like certainly there. I've already chosen my officer. Forsooth, a great arithmetician, one Michael Cassio, a Florentine, a fellow almost damned in a fair wife. So, right, a couple of things here. Cassio, it makes me laugh, arithmetician, works with numbers. He's effectively a calculator. So, complete coincidence there, Cassio, calculator. Anyway, but Shakespeare ahead of his time in many ways, including that one. It's a completely coincidental joke, and I know the calculators, it would be 1S. But anyway. So, he basically thinks of him. We haven't actually had his name yet, have we? We haven't had it in my mind, and I've forgotten to say. Oh yeah, this line here, I looked this up, and scholars think it may actually be corrupted because it doesn't really make sense. A fellow almost damned in a fair wife. Because Cassio's not married, and it could possibly just be foreshadowing of the supposed relationship with Desdemona later on. But anyway, as Iago thinks of Cassio as a numbers man, so he's just a soldier in theory. He's kind of all about theory rather than experience. Where Iago thinks I'm better for the job because I'm an experienced soldier. I should be the second in command. Never set a squadron in the field, nor the division of a battle knows. That's an ironic Shakespearean pun there, because if Cassio is an arithmetician and he works with numbers, you see, there's a little bit of joke there, division, you see, yeah, very good. But he never set a squadron in the field, nor the division of a battle knows more than a spinster. So you got a bit of misogyny in there as well, but the idea of his military acumen, his military abilities, are that of a little old lady, effectively. And it's even dismissed here as bookish theoric. So Cassio is just, he's a guy who's intelligent, but he thinks of him as a bean counter, as a numbers man, not really having practical military experience like he has. Mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership. And again, dear listener, I don't know how familiar you are with Shakespeare, but of course you'll notice when you get used to the language, Shakespeare will often reiterate and clarify the symbolism and imagery that he uses just before it. He then just actually reiterates it in plainer language. So look out for that. Mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership. And that is partially because Shakespeare's audience were used to listening to the plays rather than watching them. We tend to think of a play as a visual experience, but to Shakespeare's contemporary audience, it's an auditory experience primarily. They would be listening more than watching. So Shakespeare having that kind of emphasis, or re-emphasis I should say, helps that audience, doesn't it, when you think about it? So anyway, I'm slightly digressing. Mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership, but he, sir, had the election, as in he got the promotion, and I of whom his eyes had seen the proof at Rhodes, at Cyprus, and on other grounds, christened and heathen must be belied and calmed by debitor and creditor. So he says, and here's me, this is Iago, here's me, I fought alongside Othello in all of these battles all over the place. So Rhodes, Cyprus, other places, Christian lands, and it says heathen, like he means non-Christian lands. It's a kind of contemporary language being used there. And then he's basically been, for someone who's a numbers man, debitor and creditor, like an accountant, has been given the job that I should have had. That's how he feels. This countercaster. So again, that's what we would think of in modern terms as being like a bean counter. So Shakespeare is very clearly establishing Iago's hatred of Othello. Notice we haven't actually had Othello referred to by name yet. So that is an interesting point. And you've got an example here of antonomasia, which I'm going to write as if by magic, which is when you describe a character or a real person actually by a word or quality, something that's associated with that person. So if you referred to a rich friend as "here comes old Moneybags," someone who's flashing the cash, then you call them Moneybags, so that's associated with having lots of money. It's. You could also talk about this as well. Iago uses racial epithets to describe. That's another way of saying it, actually, in the case of Othello, anyway. He's using specifically racial epithets. He uses names directly linked to Othello's race, even though, again, we still haven't heard references to Othello by name. And his Moorship's ancient, so that means he's standard bearer. So Iago still has an important role. His standard bearer is he represents the army, like basically like carrying the flag. But it sounds like a rubbish job, but there's more to it than that. His standard bearer is, he's reasonably high ranking, but he's not an officer as such in the same way that he wanted to be. But he still, he serves in that capacity. But again, notice the racism by referring to him by his ethnicity. Now, actually, I'm going to talk about it now. I was going to say I was going to talk about it later, but I'm going to talk about it right now. I suppose this is later compared to when I said it. But there's in this play, there's a very much a strong sense of ambiguity about Othello's ethnicity as a character. And in Shakespeare's time, they're not the Elizabethan white England aren't very enlightened and worldly and would use a lot of words interchangeably. So you can have more, could refer to people of North African descent, or it could be more sub-Saharan Africa, and in modern terms you would think of it as black. And you get different productions will portray Othello as they see fit, as it depends, and it fits the text. It fits the text. The clear thing is to think about there's a clear sense of otherness in Othello as a character. He's presented as being different to the white society that he lives in. And so Othello, again, is a really interesting character because we're getting a lot of details here, even though we haven't even seen him yet, but Shakespeare gives us a sense of there's this high-ranking non-white character. He's a general, he's important to the state, he's had great military success, and he's succeeded really against all the odds, really in a society that's completely stacked against him. And it's true to say that the past isn't as totally white in terms of like Western Europe and in Shakespeare's time and in Elizabethan England as well. It's not as white as it's presented in films and TV and novels and culturally. There was more of a mix. It's particularly saying like London, in Shakespeare's time in London, he would have encountered lots of different ethnicities in London because of being an international port, and there was also a very long established, fairly large black community in London in Shakespeare's time. So yeah, it's hard to say. Obviously, we're coming from a modern perspective. We can't see it all in the same way. We can't time travel, unfortunately, and double check all of these things. But it's an interesting backdrop to the play, isn't it? I think. I'm sure you agree. But Shakespeare's already setting up Othello as an outsider. And actually, as well, think about yourself in terms of as the audience here. Well, okay, Shakespeare set up Othello as an outsider, but do you think we're meant to be sympathising with Iago straight away? Because Iago's grievance, to me, it seems pretty petty. Now, it could just be sheer blind racism and vindictiveness that's allowing Iago to do this. But it seems to be what he's saying. He seems to be this idea of how he feels being snubbed to be promoted. But anyway, as I say, that's something to keep an eye on. Keep an eye on that as you read and as you watch different productions. Watch productions. Watch as many as you can, especially live productions. That's be your best thing. Anyway, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but I hope you enjoyed it. I think it was a good tangent. So his moorship's ancient by heaven, I would rather have been his hangman. So there's deliberate parallel phrasing there with this, the idea of Iago's got to be this standard bearer, and then Rodrigo in kind of parallel says, well, I'd rather kill him as his hangman. Why there's no remedy, 'tis the curse of service. Preferment goes by letter and affection, and not by old gradation. Where each second stood heir to the thirst. Now, sir, be judge yourself, whether I am in just hurt and I find to love the more. So Iago will explain, well, I'd rather not kill him, actually, because I do serve him, and then he'll explain why that he serves him as well. One thing I was going to say was, I was thinking ahead of myself, but anyway, that was on my mind. I didn't want to leave that. Sorry. So I follow him to serve my turn upon him. So he's saying I'm going to follow Othello because it allows me to get my revenge on him. We cannot all be masters, nor all masters cannot be truly followed. And if you think about that, Iago means, well, we can't all be masters because otherwise there wouldn't be anyone to follow them, and therefore there wouldn't be masters. So effectively that's a paradox. You shall mark many a duteous and knee-crooking knave that, doting on his own obsequious bondage, wears out his time much like his master's ass, for naught but provender when he's old cashiered. Whip me such honest knaves. So he says you'll see some kind of, I suppose, servants, I suppose, or followers who will live out their days bending their knee and serving a master, and that's all they do. Whip me such honest knaves, you know. Iago is not honest. I think this is becoming very clear, isn't it? Others there are who, trimmed in forms and visages of duty, keep yet their hearts attending on themselves, and throwing but shows off service on their lords, do well thrive by them. When they have lined their coats, do themselves homage. These fellows have some soul, and such a one I do profess myself. This is like Shakespeare here is presenting Iago's manifesto. He's saying, well, I'm going to serve him because it serves me. I'm not like these other suck-ups who will just be obsequious and kind of slime balls who will just go along with it and serve it and think that's their role in life and be happy with that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to benefit myself. And actually, you're getting some context here if you think about the great chain of being and to the Elizabethan or Jacobean mind. And I say Elizabethan or Jacobean because this play kind of bridges both eras, because it's written in Elizabethan era, but then it was performed in the Jacobean era, so the time of Elizabeth I and then the time of James I. But what I was saying about the great chain of being is, of course, culturally in Shakespeare, let's just say in Shakespeare's time, that's easy to say. In Shakespeare's time, they believe in the great chain of being, as in there is this natural hierarchy. You measure everything from God down to inanimate objects, and everything's meant to exist in its place. And people aren't meant to go out of that part of the hierarchy. You're meant to stay within it. And I thought that's what they think. And there's a sense here of Iago is defying the natural order. You could also take another angle on this and think about, again from Shakespeare's time, is he projecting this idea of it's gone against the natural order? In fact, that there is a black man who is in charge of a white army. Is there another way of looking at it like that? Bear that in mind. Have a look. See what you think. That's the beauty of doing English literature, isn't it? You can have your own ideas. But I follow but myself. So that's what I said about Iago's manifesto. That's his policy. He's selfish. I think Shakespeare is clearly establishing Iago here as a villain. He's someone who's selfish and self-motivated. Then you'll recognise this. People say this phrase to this very day, my heart upon my sleeve. I wear my heart upon my sleeve for doors to peck at. And this really is Iago here, explaining how he's deceptive. He's going to appear to be a loyal friend and soldier for Othello, but he's really serving his own purpose. Now this is the real great line for whenever anyone's writing about Iago. If you don't include this line, it always seems unusual. It's like maybe the core Iago line, I am not what I am, which is a brilliant line to reflect Iago's duplicity. And in the play, you look at him as a villain, the idea of public face and private face. And Iago, in this play, will project his public face is of being a great friend to Othello, but secretly he is working against him all the time. And I am not what I am. So it's a paradoxical statement, and it really gets to the core of what Iago is all about. So we have another derogatory racial epithet here for Othello. Again, notice Shakespeare still hasn't referred to the main character by name. Well, I say main character. Iago is also main character. You could also, it's also interesting that the main character is Othello. Maybe Iago, if he found out the play wasn't named after him, he'd be even more jealous than he already is. It'd infuriate him. I don't suppose he could be more jealous than he really is already, to be honest. So what's happening is that there's call up her father, rouse him, make after him, poison his delights. So we're now getting to, they've gone to a house. They're going to the house of Brabantio, who is a local senator, and there's concern about his daughter. That's what they're coming here about. So call up her father, rouse him, make after him. Notice how Iago issues these imperatives, these commands to tell Roderigo what to do. And it's interesting that Iago said about being a follower and a servant. He's actually effectively made Roderigo his henchman, really, hasn't he? And then here is her father's house, I'll call aloud. Do with like timorous accent and die yell as when by night in negligence the fire is spied in populous cities. So really shout out to as if there's a fire. What ho, Brabantio, Signor Brabantio, ho, awake, what ho, Brabantio, thieves, thieves. So Iago helps out shouting. Look to your house, your daughter and your bags, thieves, thieves. So this going to be a metaphor. So we have Brabantio, who is the old man. He's the senator. I say old. He doesn't have to be that old. Depends on how they play it, really. But I always imagine him as an old character. What is the reason of this terrible summons? What is the matter here? Signor, is all your family within? Are your doors locked? Why, wherefore, ask you this? Wherefore also means why, actually. Zoon, sir, you're robbed. This is metaphorical because... Another famous line here. Very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. So this is an animalistic metaphor. You've got Othello is being compared to a black ram, and then a white ewe is Brabantio's daughter, Desdemona, and tupping is its sex. So it's like coarse language to describe what's happening. So arise, arise, awake the snorting citizens with the bell, or else the devil will make a grandsire of you. So again, notice the racist backdrop of the play where you're getting the devil and devilry associated with Othello, who has got the word hell hidden in his... I say hidden, not exactly hidden. It's there in the middle of his name, Othello, as well. So there's an association of darkness with evil, and this again is the racist backdrop of the era. And then... Most Reverend Signor, do you know my voice? Not I, what are you? My name is Roderigo. So Roderigo has obviously been a nuisance to Brabantio in the past. The worse a welcome, I have charged thee not to haunt about my daughter. He's basically saying, I've told you not to lurk around here. But like, oh, not Roderigo. Oh, not you. I've told you. You're not meant to be here. I told you to go away. I say go away. I'm moderating my language. But anyway... An honest plainest thou hast heard me say my daughter is not for thee. So Roderigo has been interested in Desdemona, and Brabantio's been having none of it and said, no, go away, you're not going to be with them. So Brabantio doesn't know that Othello and Desdemona are an item. I say more than an item, married, but that will be revealed. Now that's not really a spoiler because that's coming up on the next page. I think it's on the next page anyway. The knowing man is being full of supper and distempering draughts. So he says he's accusing Rodrigo of being drunk and just being bawdy and boozy. So, what tells me thou of robbing? This is Venice. My house is not a grange. So you are one of those, Zoon, sir, you are one of those that will not serve God if the devil bid you. Because we come to your service and you think we are ruffians, we'll have your daughter covered with a Barbary horse. You'll have your nephews neigh to you. You'll have courses for cousins and jennets for Germans. So look again, Othello is being likened to an animal here. So more racist, animalistic imagery. And Iago, Brabantio doesn't know who Iago is, keeping out of the way. He doesn't want to be seen. So Rodrigo is being identified, but Iago is just being there as a second voice, and he's trying to keep a low profile. But look at the racist language there as well. So, and the Barbary horse is it's a breed of horse from North Africa as well. So you then, I'm one sir that comes to tell you, your daughter and the Moor are now making the beast with two backs. So this is a sexual metaphor. If you think the beast with two backs, I'll say visualize it, but be careful how I say that. You get the idea. You get the idea. And then here's a parallel exchange. Thou art a villain. You are a senator. Iago there showing kind of very kind of contemporary contempt for a politician there, isn't he? Saying, basically equating a senator as being the same as a villain. Note though is that Shakespeare has it there in Brabantio. If we were saying earlier on that Iago is being established as a villain through the language we've seen so far, we now have another character actually just basically say, thou art a villain. So again, I think Shakespeare is clearly establishing that, and that is the I would say not nail in the coffin, not the nail in the coffin. I need a better image than that, but that is the stamp. Let's say that's the sort of stamp of thou art a villain. And then we have I know the Rodrigo, so he's been identified. But with a knave, transported with no worse nor better guard, that with a knave of common hire, a gondolier to the gross clasps of a lascivious Moor. So Rodrigo is telling him about your daughter Desdemona she is in the arms of a lascivious Moor. Now, again, Shakespeare's time, common racist tropes of the time would be the idea of an African man, and I say African in terms of, in Shakespeare's time, their ignorance. I'm just kind of reflecting their sort of generalisation that they might make, but the idea of an African man being very sexually charged, let's say it like that. So lascivious, that's what that means. Then, on Shakespeare's time, saucy had a stronger meaning. In modern times, that sounds a bit weak, but we then have done you bold and saucy wrongs. It actually means it's a stronger meaning in Shakespeare's time. So he's saying, well, we're trying to warn you here that your daughter is having sex with this Moor, as they refer to him. But again, they're not even naming Othello in this scene so far. Or Shakespeare doesn't have them name Othello in this scene so far. But say, if we're wrong, check your house, and if we're wrong, you can set the justice of the state on us because we tricked you. We can prove that we're right. Go and find she's not in the house. This accident is not unlike my dream. So a strange little supernatural reference there as well. Brabantio must have had some dream about this, about the idea of his daughter maybe running away with Othello. Maybe there's a sense of destiny that Shakespeare is suggesting there as well. Farewell, I must leave you. It seems not meet nor wholesome to my place to be produced, as in like produced, as if I shall stay against the Moor. So Iago says, I'm going to have to make a bit of a getaway here because it's not going to serve me to be identified at this point. I can't be seen as going against Othello. I've got to serve him. Because remember, we've already said that his plan is to appear to be loyal and help him, but he's going to use that situation for his own advantage to get his revenge on Othello. Then, so this is more antonomasia as well. Then For he's embarked with such loud reasons of the Cyprus wars, which even now stands in act, that for their souls another of this fathom they have none to lead their business. So the state, that they really need Othello because he is the best general there is. So they need him because the Cyprus wars, it's going to be the war with the Ottoman Empire, which is the Empire of Turkey, and not, as I like to imagine, an army of otter people. It's Ottoman. Sorry, it's a terrible joke. I've been doing that one for years. I must show out a flag and sign of love, which is indeed but sign. So there's a sense of superficiality there in the connotations of that. Lead to the Sagittary, the raised search. And what this means, this is actually a reference to, I've now lost where it is, the Sagittary. Oh yeah, I should have highlighted it, that's why I couldn't see it. That's where Othello lives, and it's basically off of St. Mark's Square in Venice, and it's the really rich, prosperous part of the city. So it suggests Othello's status. So that's why he's going to be, lead to the Sagittary, the raised search, and there I will be with him. So Iago, or Shakespeare said the episode, Iago is going to be pretending to be this loyal friend when actually he's been involved in setting up this, I wanted to say heist, but it's not quite a heist, is it? This ambush, let's say ambush, really. They're going to ambush him. It is too true and evil. Brabantio comes down in his nightgown, servants and torches. Shakespeare didn't write these stage directions, but that's how it is performed. So the idea, the audience it would be in a daytime performance, they would get an idea that it was nighttime. So gone she is, and what's to come of my despised time is naught but bitterness. Now, Rodrigo, where dost thou see her? Oh, unhappy girl, look at how fractured the speech is here. These interrogatives as well. Who would be a father? How dost thou know 'twas she? Oh, she deceives me. So Brabantio's own prejudices are being exposed here, where he's distraught that his daughter has run away with Othello because of his race. So get more tapers. Raise all my kindred. Are they married? Think you? Truly, I think you are. So this is, for Brabantio here, this is a nightmare scenario. Like he said, he had a dream about this. So this is literally a kind of nightmare scenario for Brabantio. Fathers from hence trust not your daughters. Well, this may have actually been delivered directly to the audience in Shakespeare's time. Fathers from hence trust not your daughters' minds by what you see them act. Is there not charms at which the property of youth and maidhood may be abused? Have you not read, Rodrigo, of some such thing? So charms is suggesting that there's been some magic involved in this. Call up my brother. Oh, would you had had her? So Brabantio's now saying, oh, even though he said how much he found Rodrigo really annoying, he's got to this point where, again, because of Brabantio's own prejudices, saying, well, yeah, I'd rather you had married her, actually. Even though he said he hated Rodrigo. Well, he didn't say he hated him, but he strongly disliked him. Do you know where we may apprehend her in the moor? I think I can discover him, if you please, to get good guard and go along with me. So they're going to go off to the Sagittary. So that's where Othello lives. So they can ambush him and Desdemona and find out what's going on. So that is the end of Act 1, Scene 1. I hope you enjoyed that. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, and I hope you found it useful. Stay with me as we go through the rest of the play. Have a good day or night, whatever you're doing. Thank you, and farewell until the next time.